Hello, all you patrons! Another pre-show here. Gather round.
Gather round indeed. And look. You see, I left a case on the table.
Oh,
Could that be the beginning of a new pile?
actually, people have been writing in about this. This actually has people really concerned.
I know. I've gotten some few whispers. What happened to the amazing magic pile?
Tampa Tobacconist. Here we go. Tampa Tobacconist says, "What happened to the big pile of books and papers behind Charles? That pile was the great unchanging constant of the show, the North Star of my weekend."
We feel very badly about that, Tampa. You've no idea how badly we feel. But all good things must come to an end, and it's true of piles. I mean, look at our government. Look how they're always shredding paperwork. Think of Hunter Biden.
I feel like I don't know. I mean, you don't seem so smart anymore. It's like because it's like there was all these books here, and it's like there's a presumption that you had read all these books, or they're somehow work in progress, and now there's nothing. It's like, are you doing anything anymore? Or you're
No, I'm
just
not. I'm pretty much retired. I'm just sort of enjoying the fruits of my 62 years of labor. I'm retired now. You see, I've got my gold watch presented to me upon my retirement.
uh-huh.
So I'm retired now. I'm basically not doing anything at all.
Sad. Well, I
Ah,
mean,
well,
I guess you've deserved. You've earned it. You
yeah,
deserve it.
I've earned being put out to pasture,
Yeah, exactly.
out to the boneyard,
The boneyard.
the boneyard. Yeah, death's store, that kind of thing. That's why they call my hair color in Viennese German Friedhofsblond, graveyard blonde. So, I'm just sort of kicking back. It's kind of like Miami Beach here right now. I'm an old retiree. I'm just not really doing anything, just kind of one day after another, just marking the calendar, waiting for the inevitable.
Wow, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
It's pretty much over, ladies and gentlemen. The whole story's pretty much come to an end, and every story does. So I'm pretty much retired now that the books and papers are gone off my desk. Now, mind you, if they come back, I'll be in the swim of things again.
right, right.
So I'll be de-retired, taken out of taken out of retirement and put back into service, like an old bus, like an RTD bus. You remember they had all? Oh no, you're too young. But they had all these rapid transit district RTD, Southern California Rapid Transit. I don't know what they call it now, but that's what it was when I was a kid.
I think
And
Foothill Transit.
really, I don't know.
Yeah.
What I
Okay.
do know is that the RTD buses, um, during the fuel crisis in '72, uh, they because more and more people were taking the bus, they had to bring a lot of old decommissioned buses back into service. They're these old creaky '50s things that had been out of use for a while, and you could always tell when one of them came lumbering along is they had really really small windows in front. So the things that RTD buses had, the big windows, kept creaking along, air conditioned. So they were really bottom of the line, but they hadn't been destroyed. When they were decommissioned, they just sat there in the RTD garages forever. So I'm kind of like that. I'll be taken back out from the garage and put back on routes again, filled with screaming children on hot days and no air conditioning, so they'll have to lower the windows. And the bus drivers, the older bus drivers, will feel kind of happy to be reunited with their old vehicles, which they were. I mean, the really old bus drivers would be very happy. Yeah, I used to drive this same route in a bus just like this back in '46. Got out of the war, came to LA, became a bus driver. That's what I've done ever since. Mm. So how long have you been working for the RTD? About 30 years. Which tells you this kind of conversation would be about 1976 or so.
Wow.
Isn't that exciting?
That's so exciting. In perfect metaphor, you're an old bus.
I'm an
That's
old bus.
so are you hoping for some sort of crisis so you can get put back into use?
Nah,
Yeah.
not at all. I'm quite happy to sit here complaining about the lack of air conditioning. So I don't have to listen to kids whining about not having any air conditioning. If it's that important to them, they can wait for one of the newer buses. I mean, basically, you got to, if I pull up, all right, and you're sitting there at the bus stop and you see the old 1940s bus come lumbering up, and you say to yourself, oh, I know this one doesn't have any air conditioning. You know what? If it's that important to you, wait for the next bus. I don't want a bunch of whiny kids aboard me yapping about, oh, it's so hot in here. Open the window, moron. What do you think your dad did when he was your age? Were you made of tinfoil or something? Snowflakes.
All right.
If RTD buses could talk, that's what they would say.
they would call everyone snowflakes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, see, those buses were tough. I mean, I can remember sitting on the RTD bus, and a drunk had urinated. So there was a pool of urine that went back and forth on that bus, and I pulled my feet up so it wouldn't hit my feet.
Are you joking?
No,
I repeat, you're not joking.
I'm not joking in the slightest. And you remember, it was on an RTD bus when I was 12 that I got my first education in feminism.
Right. Yeah. You because you called her ma'am or something.
Well, no, I offered her my seat.
Oh, right.
I stood up, I offered her my seat, as a well-bred young lad did in those days, and she exploded at me and called me a male chauvinist pig and so on. So I said, I'm very sorry, sir. I didn't realize you were in drag. And I sat down, and everybody laughed, and she turned bright red, and she got off at the next stop.
Chalk one up for the good guys.
Well, can you imagine going after a kid like that? I mean,
Who's trying to be considerate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she obviously needed help with her training. I'll bet she thought twice before she opened her mouth again like that.
Yeah. Bullies.
Yep. They come in all shapes and sizes. And sometimes they're young chicks trying to make a point to younger men.
All right. Questions. A lot of questions from good old Paisan, Don from Florida.
Does he have any questions about the RTD in the 1970s?
Let me see. No, I don't see any exactly like that.
Could I ask him any?
Sure. I'm sure Don would be happy to answer any of the questions that you might have about the RTD in the 1920s.
70s.
70s, excuse me.
Thank you. I'm not that old. Not yet. Don from Florida. Here's my RTD question for you. On what major Hollywood thoroughfare was Sanborn Junction to be found? The old RTD drivers, not the younger ones, but the old ones that always shout out, Sanborn Junction.
Wow, that's ultimately the ultimate esoteric question. Okay, I'm sure Don from Florida is gonna give it a go.
I think you should. See, this is a vital part of our national tradition, and I think on Lincoln's birthday, it's important that we carry on and pass on to future generations this knowledge. Because, the practice of calling out the stops was a dying one when I was a kid riding the bus. It was only the old bus drivers who would say, Vine, Hollywood and Vine, then Gower, Hollywood and Gower. They stopped doing that.
Okay, well, we'll see if Don has anything to say. Just stash this away, Charles, and maybe next pre-show, we'll see if Don's come up with something.
All right, Don, the heat's on.
All right,
It's all up to you now, pal.
Don has three questions for you. He says, please explain the history and development of the EU and the impact it has on the peoples of Europe and the church.
Well, the origins of the EU, there are two ways you can look at it. First was ideological. After World War One, rather, a number of people in varying ways, ranging from Coudenhove-Kalergi and the Pan-Europa Union to people like Karl Anton de Rohan, they all realized that Europe was going to be squeezed between the Soviet Union and the United States. So how do you fend that off? Well, a Union of Europe. And for those who are Central European, they saw the Austro-Hungarian Empire as a model for what could be a united Europe, not least because of its connections with Charlemagne's Europe and all that. Well, those ideas pretty much went nowhere and were swallowed up in World War II. But after World War II, when the predictions came to pass and Europe was in fact partitioned between the United States and the Soviet Union, three men came forward. There were theorists like Otto von Habsburg and Coudenhove-Kalergi and so on, and groups like Neues Abendland and all that, who wanted to revive a Christian interlocking Europe after the medieval fashion, but updated for the present. But these were thinkers and writers and journalists and so on. Three practical politicians, all of whom were of the Christian democratic persuasion. And in those days, Christian democratic meant what it said. They believed in democracy, but they also believed very much in Christianity and specifically Catholicism. And these three were Robert Schuman of France, who is up for canonization, Alcide de Gasperi, who is also being considered, Konrad Adenauer of Germany. De Gasperi was Italian, Schuman was French, Adenauer was Germany. They were the leaders of their respective countries. And they laid the foundations for what they hoped would be a Christian united Europe. Later on, people like Winston Churchill and Charles de Gaulle got in on the deal. And the result eventually was the European Economic Community, which started out with the three Benelux countries, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and Germany, France, and Italy. Now, it's very important to remember that to a continent that had been shattered by two wars between France and Germany, the maintenance of peace is seen more important than any other issue. And reconciliation between France and Germany was seen to be the way to go. And of course, prior to the late 1960s, all through the 50s and into the 60s, the Christian Democrats were the dominant pushers of the European ideal, although there were some socialists and liberals and others who were for it. And in those years, they meant what they said about Europe's soul being Christian and so on. After Vatican II, however, it became the standard line of the hierarchy that the church did not want any special rights or privileges. And the quest for the Catholic state was basically given up. The idea being that Catholics should simply participate with others of goodwill to form a more just society, leaving out the fact that Catholics and others may have very differing views of what a just society is. And what complicated all of this was not only the hierarchy's retreat from active Catholic political action, but also the sexual revolution, specifically with contraception and abortion. The Christian democratic parties of Europe, of Western Europe, were keen on opposing these things, but being Christian Democrats, they would never do anything without the support of the hierarchy in the given country. this support was denied, and so their opposition to these things collapsed. And in Western Europe, the Christian Democrats became the sort of jobs for the boys outfits that we're used to today. Now, Otto von Habsburg and various people like him, he went into the European Parliament in 1979. Now, that was an important thing because prior to this time, there had been the European Parliament, but its members were appointed by the governments of Europe. But with a parliament that was directly elected by the people of each country, the EU began a course of consolidation and you might say supranational development that, well, it went from being the European Community to the European Union. And then, of course, in 1999, the Maastricht Treaty allowed, actually it was earlier than that, 1992? Anyway, whenever it was, the Maastricht Treaty allowed free travel between most EU members. And then, as we know, in 1999, 2000, the euro came in. Now, Otto von Habsburg, etc., people like him, had tried to keep the EU Parliament and Commission reminded of the fact that half of Europe was under Soviet occupation. When the Soviet Empire fell, it became an important thing for the post-communist states to come into the EU, not least as a rejection of their Soviet past. And the same with joining NATO. The problem was that at the same time, the EU was morphing from what it had been into almost a caricature of what its founders had believed in. And part of the problem is that European values, which is a phrase that came very much into vogue in the 90s and the zeros, meant very different things in Central Europe to Western Europe. In Central Europe, they meant and mean faith, family, humane structures of society, subsidiarity, solidarity, etc. Whereas in Western Europe, European values have come to mean the kind of immoral sludge that dominates Western Europe and America. So the EU became an important way of trying to force this stuff into Central Europe. And that's where we are now.
Right. All right, thank you for that one, Charles. Please discuss the life and work of Dominican theologian Michel Louis Gerard de Lauriers and his thesis of Cassicum.
Cassiacum.
Given current and past events, I find it, at the least, a fascinating theory of how all of the popes since Paul VI have been indeed validly elected and held office, but lack the fullness of the papacy due to their embracing of the heresy of modernism due to varying degrees.
All right. Well, de Lauriers was, as you said, a Dominican theologian. He came to believe just what you said. So it's a theory that is called not Sede-Vacantism, but Sede-Privatism, which means that there is a privation in the papacy. De Lauriers himself came to believe this and also came to believe he was better off and the people of God were better off with him as a bishop. So he got himself consecrated bishop by a Vietnamese Catholic bishop who did a lot of illicit episcopal consecrations. And a number of the so-called Sede-Privationist groups today who have bishops claim descent from him and or other bishops consecrated by Tuc, who was the brother, incidentally, of the murdered president of South Vietnam. Anyway, or brother-in-law, brother or brother-in-law, I forget which. Anyway, this is very important to some people. The problem with it is that there's no one who can make those sorts of judgments about a pope, no matter how horrendous the pope may be. I mean, my favorite example of this is the famous Cadaver Synod, where Pope Stephen VI had his predecessor, Pope Formosus, dug up and set in a chair and had a trial, found him guilty, etc. Now, everybody knows, or most people know the story because it's so grotesque. What they don't know is the problem with the judgment itself. The problem is this. Stephen VI declared that Formosus had not been valid pope because he had been bishop of another city. Now, of course, the popes have all been bishops of other cities for centuries, but that was not the case way back then. So this was his judgment, and if I were to take it, then I'd have to say that the papal see has been empty for several centuries, if not a whole millennium. But beyond that, he then declared that because of this, Formosus's sacramental acts, including the ordination of priests and consecration of bishops, were invalid. But you see, that in itself is an heretical judgment. The sacraments work ex opere operato, but it didn't matter because Stephen VI was pope and he could do whatever he liked. So all the bishops and priests that Formosus had ordained or consecrated were deposed. Well, Stephen VI died, and his successor said, nope, just kidding, it was all nonsense, forget it, and these people were restored to their prior posts. A few more popes are elected and die. And then comes a gentleman called Sergius III, who's a disciple of Stephen VI. And he says, nope, just kidding. Stephen VI was quite right, all true. And as a result, not just the surviving bishops and priests that Formosus had ordained and or consecrated, but the bishops that had been consecrated by those bishops were all deposed as invalid bishops. Now, why do I bring this up? Because this is one of those episodes where if you lived through it, you were stuck. There was nothing to be done until God saw fit to take that pope away. And he did. None of them last forever, you know.
What a mess.
I'll say.
Thank you for doing that, because we have a tendency to say this is the worst it's ever been in all these struggles, but little anecdotes like that are really important to keeping the perspective, I think.
Well, yeah, and of course, there's also the fact that back then, what happened in Rome did not have the effect in the rest of the Catholic world that it does now, not least because of our technology and so forth. So you had all sorts of strange things happen that people just weren't aware of, because one of the funnier things on Catholic Twitter is that somebody will say, boy, I'm gonna be like a medieval Catholic who didn't even know the name of the Pope but just prayed for him. Now, mind you, I wish I could quite go along with that. I can't, but I appreciate the sentiment. And there is a certain amount of truth to it. I mean, certainly when a pope does something crazy, since we have no power over him, all we could do is A, pray for him, and B, ignore him to the best of our ability. I mean, that's easier for a layman to do than for a cleric.
Well, Father, I mean, for me, I'm just abiding by Father Ripperger's words, where Again, in our blog on tumblrhouse.com, he has 10 problems in traditionalist movement. We cannot allow the problems of the church to affect our spiritual lives. It doesn't matter if someone's put the knife in your back. It doesn't matter how bad things are. If it's starting to affect your spiritual life, you have to get your mind off it. And that means that we have to have it. We have to have a detachment, even from the idea of a healthy church, even though that is what we must strive for. We must be detached from any vindication from those who harmed us. So to me, that's what I sort of aspire to. That rings true to me. So I personally can't handle it. I mean, I feel like some people can handle it a lot better. I can't really handle it. So, and there's nothing I can do about it other than pray for it, honestly.
No, you're wrong. There's a lot you could do about it. There's a lot. You can get very, very angry. You can select a very important position that's important because you hold it. And then you could attack everyone on Twitter who doesn't agree with you.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's something you could do. It's something you could do. You know, this circumstances like this always make me think of a disaster. You know, like a plane crash or a bus, say an old RTD bus, filled with annoying kids who keep whining about the lack of air conditioning. And there's a big accident. Well, everyone's got a different view of what caused it. It was the driver. It was the kids. It was the road construction. It was the drunk driver driving alongside. It was this. It was that. And, you know, all of these assertions usually have a certain amount of truth in them, but they're generally rather incomplete. You know, and the worst thing you could do is having it was the drunk driving alongside that cut the bus off. And if you think there was any other element involved, you're evil. To which the response is, no, it was the bus drivers falling asleep for just a second. And that was the only contributing factor. And if you think otherwise, you're evil. No, it was the kids whining about the lack of a air conditioner on the bus that distracted the bus driver. And if you think otherwise, you're evil. No, it's because the bus was really old. If it had been a new, modern bus, this would never have happened. Well, the truth is, probably they're all right to a greater or lesser degree. And attacking the other views doesn't really help that much. You'd probably be better off raising money to get a new bus.
You really got buses on the mind today.
What do you mean?
I mean, this is a continuation of your metaphor about how you're an old bus.
Yeah, I am. I'm glad you noticed that. Just sitting here in the garage being serviced, yeah. Yeah. Waiting for the day that may, I hope, never come, that I'll be pressed into service again and once again be driven down those mean streets of Hollywood, ferrying drunks and lowlifes and all kinds of, and children, and all kinds of weird people from one end of Hollywood to the other. Yeah.
All right.
I'm just a number one bus going up La Brea, making a right on Hollywood Boulevard, and then going all the way downtown, where Hollywood turns into Sunset, and then taking Sunset into downtown.
All right, we're going to have one last question for the pre-show. Don says, please discuss the history and key figures of the House of Visconti and their very strange coat of arms.
Well, that's a tall order. They ran Milan for a very long time, from 1266 on till for 200 years, I think. And I'm very rusty as to their individuals. The families still survive today. There's still branches of it. The very strange coat of arms is a green snake, either swallowing or vomiting an infant.
I've put a version of the coat of arms. You say a snake, to me it looks like a Chinese dragon almost, or something. In terms of the head looks like, because it's got teeth.
The head looks like a dragon now.
Yeah, but yeah, very strange.
Well, it's Italian.
It is Italian. I look at
the soul of Italy is very strange. We know this. That's okay. Look, a country that has that much culture, that much music, that much art, that much good cuisine, that much of everything, it's got to be weak in something. And maybe the whole weirdness thing, maybe a little lack of sanity, is simply the just concomitant of being so talented in so many other things.
You're trying to make my brain explode right now.
What?
You're just trying to. That was brutal. Where you tried to simultaneously. that was. All right?
You seem very confused at the moment. Are you
all right?
You
really lathered it on there, honestly.
You seem somewhat confused. Are you all right? I think it's time for gaslighting now. You seem so terribly upset. Which is what you would expect. I mean, look, such a talented people. You've got to presume there'd be little, like holes in the brain, as it were, because there's so much there.
Right. I mean, big brains that there's going to be little spots
spots are a little strained.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you take a piece of cloth, right? And you just stuff that cloth. You just absolutely fill it with stuff, right?
Okay.
Well, there'll be tension, there'll be pressure at certain segments of that cloth. And they'll be thinner in certain areas, and you have to expect that. Because it's so filled with stuff. And that's what the Italians are like. I mean, there's so much good stuff in there that it gets a little...
Okay, we're starting to veer a little bit. In terms of what's in our brains. Okay,
it gets a little threadbare. That's all I'm saying.
A little threadbare now. Okay, you're veering in a certain direction. That
it's the internal pressure of all that good culture and art and stuff. And the cuisine. I mean, the cuisine alone.
Okay. So we're just bitter from the poll last week. That's okay, Charles. It's okay to be bitter.
I'm not bitter about the poll. Obviously, as one of the smarter people who wrote in said, the vast majority of those who took the poll couldn't afford French cuisine. I understand this.
And I'm sure there's a lot of other intellectual refutations there, like, oh, that's why I'm not into democracy, blah, blah, blah. Various other snobbish considerations about the peasant folk versus the elite.
I have a lot of fallback positions, don't you fret. Self-justification and rationalization are two of my greatest talents. I'm very proud of them both. I'm a master at this kind of stuff. You should know that. You know me long enough.
I know. I see them coming up. I see them boiling up to the surface.
And if you notice any contradictions, you're the wrong one. Remember that. if you say, wait a minute, Charles, you can't say this and then say that. Well, that just shows you're being uncharitable. I had somebody on Twitter say to me about something or other, I forget what it was, that this and such a comparison was uncharitable. Well, my response is a comparison of its nature can't be uncharitable. It could be inaccurate. It might not be apt. Those are true. But it can't be uncharitable.
Yeah.
It's like saying a weather report is uncharitable. Don't you think LA's had enough rain? To say there's going to be more would be uncharitable. What?
What post was that for? I feel I've seen a
don't
lot of your.
remember.
No, you don't remember.
I don't remember. I mean, frankly, I generate a lot of stuff, and as soon as it comes, it goes out again.
Yeah. Okay. Because you've had a lot of zingers lately. I feel like, but okay.
Well, it's because of my retirement.
Yeah.
Just sitting here in the old bus barn with nothing to do except get my tires inflated and my petrol and oil changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Not a lot to do except get on Twitter. That's what old buses do.
all right. All right.
Even if they're Italian, there was a Fiat bus in the next barn.
What's a Fiat bus?
A bus made by the Italian Fiat company.
Wow. Okay.
I didn't even know they made them until they hauled this thing in.
Wow. Yeah.
It has plush carpeting inside. I never had any carpeting, but it has plush carpeting.
Excellent. All right, that's gonna do it for the pre-show. Stay tuned.
It's Lincoln's birthday, ladies and gentlemen, and when you see this, it will be the legal holiday of Lincoln's birthday. Today is Sunday, and this is the real day, but tomorrow is when they'll be celebrating it.
All right, so stay tuned. Full episode coming right at you.
See ya.